What's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. I'm excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. Today we got Hedy on with us, which I'm really excited about because she just finished going through the summer 2023 recruiting process, and she was able to land a very successful offer, but also more importantly, like she did that despite starting the process really really late in the recruiting timeline. And so I know that that's typically like a situation that a lot of students find themselves in, especially given how early the recruiting process kicks off nowadays. And so I wanted to get her on here to just kind of like talk about how she was able to accomplish her goals in such a short amount of time, and hopefully shed some light for you guys on how you might be able to do the same as well. So, with that said, Hedy, thank you for taking the time to be on here with us today. And if you don't mind, just kind of start things off for us by introducing yourself real quick and just kind of telling people who you are.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Sam. So I'm Hedy. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a junior at Yale College. I think like in terms of self-intro, I'm a first generation low-income college student. I am from New York City. And, I think like before joining Wall Street Mastermind, a lot of what made IB recruiting difficult was that I'm a STEM major. I'm a molecular biology major. And, that transition is definitely a little bit tough. A lot of people have asked me why I've decided to make that transition.
Mm,
Yale is also a very much like liberal arts focused college. So there was not that much of like a finance curriculum.
mm,
And so that also definitely made it difficult in terms of exposure. So,
gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So, like, we'll dive into your story more a bit here because I think there's a lot of interesting things to unpack. But before we do that, can we just kind of
Mhm.
like tell our audience? So let's work backwards. Like, what was the um, outcome in the end in terms of like what offers that you got?
Yeah, for sure. So I ended up accepting the offer for TD, their financial sponsors group in New York. And I was deciding among Wells Fargo and their healthcare San Francisco office and Rabobank's, which is like an agri-finance bank, New York office for summer 2023.
Got it. Okay. So basically you got looks like three different offers, right? And that was
Mhm.
all in I mean you joined our program, I guess back in like late June.
Yes.
So summer between your sophomore and junior year, basically, right?
Mhm.
And you got these three offers, I guess, in September, right? Like all of them came in September, I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So it basically took you like about 3 months from start to finish to get these three offers. Okay. Um, how did you, I know we had like lots of discussions about this, but like, for our audience's benefit, like what went into your decision to ultimately choose the TD offer over the Wells offer and the Rabo offer?
Yeah. So I think in this respect, I definitely was very conflicted. And, Sam and the team offered a lot of feedback for this, which was super helpful. So I personally wasn't super familiar with how each of the different banks was like in terms of like culture, about like moving offices. And for me, like I really wanted to end up in New York. So ultimately that's what made me end up decide with TD because, they're like the New York office and after some conversations, I heard that it would make the most sense because in the future, I'd also love to dabble in PE, possibly, and financial sponsors, seems to be a good segue into that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think like on this piece, like I'll just, make a quick little note, which is I think as someone who's like having to make like major career decisions for the first time, it
Mhm.
can be very overwhelming and even confusing, right? Because
Mhm.
obviously all the firms that gave you offers, they really wanted you, and they're all kind of like trying to pitch you on why
Mhm.
their firm is the best opportunity that's in front of you. And I remember us talking about like so many different factors in terms of like, you have location preference, you have
Mhm.
like group preference in terms of like certain industries that you might be more interested in. And then like, for some groups, like, oh, the people are so nice. And then what else? Like they have certain perks, right? Or And I forgot what else like people kind of threw at you, but like
Mhm.
there were a lot of different things. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like it's very, very rare that you're gonna have if you have multiple offers, which is a great problem to have, by the way. But like if you and a lot of our clients end up in that situation, but like when you end up in that situation, like it's in my experience, it's almost usually not going to be the case where you have like one clear cut winner that checks all the boxes. Like, oh, this group
Mhm.
is like number one in all of these areas that I care about, right? So usually you're like basically making trade offs, but I think like the important thing is like really knowing like which criteria is more important, right?
Mhm.
Like for
Mhm.
example, like if someone says, I don't know, we have all these nice perks and like dinner in office and like happy hour and all this and that. And like it might sound great, but like to be honest, like that should be like very, very low on your list, right? But like sometimes
Mhm.
as a college student, I think it can be like kind of difficult to separate like what really matters from like what doesn't matter, right? And so like that's where kind of like, we're here to obviously give you our input, but ultimately, I think still give you the space to make your own decision because it is a very personal decision and it is your career and there's no right or wrong answer. It just ultimately comes down to like what's important to you, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I remember like also frantically calling some upperclassmen that I had spoken to. And they said, they really thought that no matter what bank I really ended up with, like it would still be great exposure, great experience. And, in the end, like lateraling between banks or even like recruiting for full time, like there's still a lot of room to kind of like move around and do something different if, the offer that you chose was not for you.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. And that's a good point, which is like I always tell people too, like, it's not realistic. It's not realistic to expect you as a 19 or 20-year old to like have 100% certainty or conviction about like what you want, right? Like
Mhm,
like it's
mhm,
okay if you don't. And I always tell people like if you don't know what you want, then like the best thing to do typically is to just like pick the option that's gonna help you preserve like maximum optionality down the road,
mhm,
right? And so like um whatever opportunity is going to allow you to I don't know, have the best exit opportunity or um just like be able to lateral the easiest or whatever. And like, from that standpoint, I think like being in New York obviously is going to be easier, right? Because
mhm,
there's a lot more opportunities out there. But even like on a more macro level, like a lot of people that don't know what they want to do for like the rest of their careers, like that's why investment banking is still like a good place to start because I feel like investment banking is one of those jobs where even if you go do it for 1 year or 2 years and you realize it's not for you, it actually opens up more doors and it doesn't really close anything off. And so like you actually have more opportunity coming out of it, which is the beauty
mhm.
of it all. Right. So anyway, I think that's great. And obviously, huge congrats on getting so many offers in such a short amount of time. I want to like kind of go back to kind of the beginning of the process for you. So obviously, like I
Mhm,
said, you joined, late June, like sophomore summer, which
mhm,
is pretty late for junior summer internship recruiting, right? Because like nowadays, I
mhm.
mean, I look at the class, like your class is like mostly done at this point, right? We're in like October of junior year already, but like for the class below you, for the sophomores, um, like RBC Capital Markets just opened up the application for summer 2024, right? And it's October 4th of 2022 right now as the time of this
Right.
recording. So like they just started their sophomore year
Yeah.
and RBC is already recruiting. So like given how early the recruiting process starts nowadays, like when did you realize you want to do investment banking?
Yeah. I think like I'm sure this is something that's shared by a lot of, students who might be trying to like transition or break into finance, but you're always kind of like on the edge. You're not really sure if you want to commit to it. Um, just like a lot of oscillating between ideas that you want to do. For
Mm,
me, I think it really happened like sometime around like late sophomore year. And so at that point, I was really trying to figure out what exactly I wanted, but I knew that pre-med was not my thing. I knew that I didn't really want to do straight science. And so, this past summer, my internships were like dabbling in biotech startups and, public health research. And I kind of realized that I was more drawn to like the business side of things, more fast-paced side of things.
Mm,
And that's what really like drew me to investment banking at the end. And
mm.
at that point, like I realized that in the timeline, I was really, really late to the game. And that's when I kind of realized that I really needed to sit down, really get my stuff together, and figure out if there was like a way for me to really take advantage of the time that I had.
Gotcha. So
Mhm.
like literally even up till your sophomore summer, like everything you had done up to that point was more geared towards sounds like MCB, like biotech stuff or like pre-med stuff basically because that's what you thought you wanted to go into.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So like when you joined Wall Street Mastermind,
Mhm.
you had like and from like a resume standpoint, you had like zero relevant finance experience then.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. And had you done anything to kind of like prep for investment banking recruiting prior to joining? Because I know you decided you wanted to make this pivot in late sophomore year, and then you joined us
Mhm.
in like late June. So I don't know, like maybe there's like 1 or 2 months in between. Like, what were you doing during that time? Like, were there other resources that you were already using, or maybe you hadn't done anything yet, and Wall Street Mastermind was like the first thing? Like,
Mhm.
kind of what was the situation for that?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, I'm first on low income. And so it didn't really make that much sense for me to look into like high cost alternatives. So, my first step was really to reach out to alumni, upperclassmen, like people who sent along resources like, the M&I, like 400 questions, like different guides, all that. I also looked into like online classes that were free on Coursera.
Hmm.
But I think like what I found was that a lot of them were not very condensed, or either like they touched on very like broad topics, or I felt like they didn't cover like the specific details or types of questions that might be asked in interviews.
Hmm.
And I think that that ultimately was what made me realize that I needed something a little bit more focused, more like thought out,
Hmm.
and more honestly like geared towards the IB recruitment process rather than just like in general, what is IB? What is like in the industry like.
Hmm. Gotcha. So basically, I mean, like a lot of people, but especially for you, given kind of like your constraints financially, like you always try to find like lower cost alternatives first, right? Like I mean, if
Mhm.
you can save the money, why not? But what you're saying is after doing your due diligence on those options, and that was your first choice, but like most
Mhm.
of them are kind of stay at like the 30,000 foot level and they don't kind of like get down to into like the nitty gritty details that you actually need to learn. Was that the issue?
Yeah, I think so.
Gotcha.
And I thought that it also helped that, with Wall Street Mastermind, there's a community of other students who are kind of in the same shoes, also recruiting, also, or like even people who have successfully like acquired offers already. And then, they can offer a lot of advice and even just talk you through some things you might want to expect on your
Yeah.
interviews. And I think that has definitely been immensely helpful
Yeah.
in my
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So I mean, I feel like a lot of people in your situation um might not have done what you've done, right? Like, because ultimately, like, obviously, you invested to be in a part of this program, but like, we talk to
Mhm.
so many students that are just like, oh, okay, upperclassmen gave me the 400 questions guy, and they told me just read this guy. This is the exact same guy that they read, and that's how they got in. And so, like,
Mhm.
how come you didn't just like do the same thing that everyone else is already doing? Because like, I feel like it's psychologically, it's much easier to just follow the crowd, right? And especially when you don't have like just a bunch of excess financial capital that you can just throw around. Like I feel like
Mhm.
that would have been the easier thing to do, or like the at least like on the surface that would have seemed like the easier thing to do, or you could have easily rationalized or justify in your head why you're just gonna go that route, right? So
Mhm.
like, what was it that ultimately made you decide to invest anyway? Because I'm sure this wasn't like an easy decision for you or your parents. I assume you had to like talk about it with your parents in depth and you guys had to like really make a decision as a family, right? So like, can you kind of like walk us through like the behind the scenes of how you guys came to this conclusion of like, yeah, this would be the right decision for you.
Yeah. Um, I think partly it is also because I come from this background that I've grown to value even more a community and, having a support system.
Mm,
And that's something that, when I was having my first talks with Joseph, that really drew me in because, I think whether it be applying for college, which I think in some ways are kind of similar to recruitment, um, I feel like one thing I really like wish I had was people I could ask questions to, right? People
mm,
that I felt like could really guide me through. Even afterward, navigating the process of like which offer to accept, like which people to talk to. I feel like all of that to me is more important than like looking at a guide and like reading it because I feel like that almost doesn't give me a sense of like the type of work I'd be doing in the future, the type of people I'd be interacting with. Like I feel like Wall Street Mastermind has given me that,
mm.
and is really what made me make the investment in the end.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Mhm.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I think it's I want to give you a lot of credit because I think that uh there's a saying like, I mean, there's different sayings, but there's like, your network is your net worth. There's like, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? I feel like one big difference that I've noticed with because I know a lot of people that are like very wealthy, and then I also obviously know people that are like, don't come from a super wealthy background, including myself, right? Like I didn't grow up being like very financially well off at all. And I feel like one of the big differences between people's mindset and mentality is that like the wealthy people, they really, really value like their network and their connection and who they know and like having access to people.
Mhm.
Because ultimately, like that's what truly is like the most valuable, right? And then versus like,
Mhm.
I think for people that maybe don't come from a lot, um, they haven't really experienced firsthand most of the time just how valuable that can be when you like
Mhm.
surround yourself with the right people and like the right people in the right places. And so like it's not their fault, but they just like naturally they're not conditioned to think that way, right? So I feel like for you to be a first gen student and come from that background and still have the mentality that hey, like this is really valuable and important, I think that's like, again, I want to give you credit because I don't think that a lot of students in your situation might have that type of foresight, right? And I think that like you're absolutely right. It's like a lot of people think like, oh, Wall Street Management is like, yeah, yeah, it's a coaching program. Yes, like we do help you, and yes, you have someone to ask questions to anytime you want, right? Like you just like 24/7, you can message us around the clock, and like we'll always answer, and that's great. And like you don't really find that anywhere else. But I think also like the part that most people don't realize is what you said, which is ultimately like what you've joined is this network, which is right now, hundreds of people. In the future, it will be thousands of people and maybe more as the years go by. And most, if not all of these people are going to be starting their careers on Wall Street at some of the top firms in the world. And that is a very, very valuable network, like a professional network to be a part of, right? Like you don't know like where you might, get a job referral from someone or, some investment opportunity or whatever. It's like when everyone is successful together and they're all kind of like aggregated in one place, like good things typically happen, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so yeah, like I think that's really awesome. Like, was it difficult convincing your parents to support you with this, or like, or I don't know if you like invested in this yourself, or did your parents have to help you? But like, how was that conversation? I guess.
Yeah. So I actually invested in it myself, just because, I come from a single parent household and my mom hadn't been feeling very well,
Mm.
recently health-wise. And so, I didn't want to put more on her plate.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm on full aid at Yale. So I also work a lot of side jobs. And I think, I was able to save enough,
Yeah.
for this program and, really just, I guess, took a gamble.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So I actually didn't even realize that you pay for this yourself, but we have you're not the first person to do that. Like I can
Mhm.
think of other students that we've had in the past, like Valeria comes to mind,
Mhm.
Bushra. Like we had, for some reason, a lot of them are female. I don't know why, but like they were very similar. It's just like, first gen, low income, and then like they have saved up, they work to support themselves. They have
Mhm.
saved up a decent amount of money, but like this was a very sizable investment where basically they were like
Mhm.
going all in, right? It's like, to use a
Mhm.
poker analogy, they're pushing all their chips to the middle and they just kind of bet on themselves, and all of them had like really, really good outcomes, right? Like they all got
Mhm.
into bulge bracket banks, and but this is but this is honestly like, I always tell people, you think about every single, I mean, name whoever you want, like think of a successful person that you admire, right? Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, whoever. Okay. Um, I don't think there's a single successful person in the world, Warren Buffett, who like does not take risks, right? So it's not like without taking any risk, like it's hard to have like outsized rewards, right? Like
Mhm.
it's you can play it safe your entire life, like even like from an investment perspective, like you could like never invest in anything, just keep your money in your bank account, and earn like
Mhm.
0.1%. Like that's not how people get wealthy, right? But it's not. But the thing is, like when you take risks, it has to be a calculated risk. It has to be, you have to be well informed. You have to like really do your due diligence, which I'm sure you did, and like make sure that everything checks out. And then like if it does, and the potential rewards, first of all, like what's the probability of you being correct versus the probability of you being incorrect? And then also, if you're correct, what is the potential upside versus if you're incorrect, what is the potential downside, right? And like
Mhm.
if the probability weighted upside far outweighs the probability weighted downside, then your risk reward profile is asymmetrical, and those are the type of investments that you really want to make, right? Which
Mhm.
I feel like if you really think about it, obviously this was a lot of money for you, but now that you're going to be in investment banking, at a minimum, you should be making at least $150,000 a year right out of college, and like no less than that for the rest of your career, right?
Mhm.
So like that's the upside, right? And like I think like for someone who's first income low, first gen low income or whatever, like that's that's life changing, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I say that as someone who like, also again didn't come from a lot. Like starting my career in investment, the reason I was so motivated to break into investment banking was because I was sick and tired of being in that type of situation, right? And I saw how it affected my parents. I saw how it affected even like our relationship with our parents, and like me and my sister, and how close we are with our parents, and they're stressed out all the time. And I was just like, when I grow up, I don't want to have that. Right? I was like, I don't want to, have to always argue with my wife about money. I don't want to like have my kids like be distant from me because I'm always in a bad mood, whatever. So this is like that was actually like my motivation for wanting to get
Mhm.
into banking. And like after I got into banking, like it changed my life in the sense that like I've never, from the time I graduated college till now,
Mhm.
till today, which I'm 36 or 37. I guess I'm 37 now, kind of old.
Mhm.
I've never had to worry about money ever,
Mhm.
right? Which is
Mhm.
like very different from what it was like growing up. And so I'm like, and that's also like part, like I think students like you guys are like, not that all of our students are like have similar profile like you do, but like students like you, I especially love working with because I kind of see a little bit of myself, right? And then I know how much better my life is today because of investment banking, and I'm like, for you guys to also be able to have that, like that's like just, it's very fulfilling for me. So anyway, I'm going on a tangent here, but like this is just something that I'm kind of passionate about. So thanks for sharing your story there. Um, so I guess like let's talk a little bit more about kind of like the specifics. So like you come in, sounds like
Mhm.
you had no finance experience up to that point, right? And then
Mhm.
like you hadn't really like done too much yet on like the recruiting prep side of things. It was already June,
Mhm.
late June. So I think like when you came in, most of the bulge bracket and elite. Oh, most of pretty much all the elite boutique banks were pretty much done, I think, and like
Hmm.
most of the bulge bracket banks were also done already, right? There might have
Hmm.
been like a couple that were at the tail end of their recruiting process, but like, what did you do after you came into the program then? Because obviously, you were probably feeling a lot of like time pressure in terms of like, how do I do everything I need to do and learn everything I need to learn, and you're essentially starting from scratch.
Hmm.
So like walk us through that kind of journey, like the last 3 months or so, like as you were going
Hmm.
through the recruiting process, like what was that like? And like what were you doing and how did you kind of get to the end goal so quickly, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the first thing for me was just like thinking about what my goal was and, hearing that middle market banks, for instance, were still available. I think that that was a good thing. Like it was a very motivating factor for me.
Mm,
And after that, it was just kind of breaking down the larger tasks into smaller ones. And I think that, Wall Street Mastermind definitely has a really great framework in terms of splitting up. Like with the modules, you have like the technical question prepping and then the behavioral question prepping. And then, just like making sure that I was covering most of the bases
mm,
um, to like as detailed as I could. Um, and, after that, it was just making sure I was talking to enough people to really understand, the different banks I was applying to, what their like work life is like, work life balance, what their sort of perks are or like downsides are, what the people are like, really. And I think that's something that um, really helped me get my act together. Just because, you're getting to know these people, you are realizing that you're like enjoying your time talking to them. And I think that also helps you as like a student who might be feeling a little lost, really think that, hey, if I can like get through this obstacle, then like I can get to where they are. And I think that's something that I really held in front of me when, there were times when I'm like, I don't know if I like can keep on cramming or really
mm,
keep working through things. Because, recruitment is a long, I feel like prepping for recruitment is a long process and it's a lot of things that you have to keep in mind and think about. But I think like I was lucky enough to really have like the right people really show me what to do and where to go.
yeah, for sure. So like if we were to kind of break it down into kind of the major categories or major buckets of like things that you had to get done on your checklist, like
Hmm.
what would you say are like maybe like the 4 or 5 things that you had to do?
Yeah. Um, I think definitely like A was making sure my resume, right, my cover letter was down because that's literally what you need before you apply to anything.
Mm,
And like hearing back from them, like the banks will take a while. So definitely recommend that as like immediate first step.
mm,
And then really making sure that you are prepared for the interviews, right? Because there's really no point in getting an interview if you like flop while talking.
yeah.
So really having my behaviorals ready, really fleshing out my story with like the team at Wall Street Mastermind. That's like a second thing. And then third thing I would say is like technicals, really making sure that I have like a bare bones understanding. Um, because I don't have that much finance experience and it but I really need to show them that I am not like necessarily weaker than other candidates that they're interviewing. Like I think that definitely takes a lot of prep work.
Mm,
And really putting in the time for that. So I think that was three things. And then I think like the fourth thing I would really emphasize is really reaching out to you, to Sam, and really trying to like start these conversations with like alumni, with current students who are going through the same things and, may have applied to the same banks because they really, really, I think, offer a lot of help.
mm.
Yeah,
You're talking about other students and alumni that are in Wall Street Mastermind.
right, right.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, for sure. And then I guess like also the other thing that was you already mentioned this before was it sounds like you had to do a lot of networking with the bankers at all the
Mm-hmm.
different firms that you were applying to, right? So if I were to
Yeah.
like kind of recap, it was like having a good resume, networking with the bankers,
Mm-hmm.
those kind of like determine how many interviews you can get, and
Right.
then prepping for the interviews, behaviorals, technicals, like those are kind of like the major categories. And then like throughout that entire process, the common thread is like reaching out to other people inside the Wall Street Mastermind network who maybe already had or have already are either already working at these banks, or some of them, are upperclassmen who have already gone through the process, and then like getting them to answer your questions and help you with whatever it is that you need help with as well.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, on the resume point, like when you came in, like you didn't have any relevant experience yet at the time, right? Initially, because like all of your experience was mainly like pre-med and bio stuff. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So like you had to get something pretty quickly then, like to
Yeah.
just kind of like beef up your resume. So like how quickly were you able to kind of like find your first relevant internship to
Mhm.
add to your resume?
Yeah. So this is like where actually through Wall Street Mastermind, I found out what a search fund is.
Hmm.
And it's like the small scale PE type of entity. And like I'm sure Sam has more to say about that. But basically like with the guides that we have, I was able to like get a basic understanding of what it is, how they worked, and then I just started like applying to different search funds who were looking for interns.
Hmm.
Given that it was unpaid, but I think definitely super helpful for gaining exposure to like industry searches and relevant skills to IB. And I think I got that offer confirmed maybe like August-ish. Yeah, like so it took maybe like a little bit more than a month
Okay.
to really have that
Yep.
go through because again, you still need like basic behaviorals, basic resume, cover letter for even for that.
Yep.
Um, and so, after getting that, I think I felt a lot more prepared
Hmm.
to go through IB recruitment because like essentially I feel like search fund recruitment is like a mini version, like a fun size version where you're still going through like interviews, still going through like different rounds.
Right.
And I think like in the end it really paid off.
Yep. Yep, for sure. And like also the thing is that was your first like finance internship ever, right? So like
Mhm.
I think for a lot of people, that's kind of where they get stuck is they know they need relevant experience, but they don't know how to get relevant experience because when they apply to these places, people won't hire them because they don't have any relevant experience in the first place. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg problem. And like you have to kind of solve that first and just get that first internship before. And then like after that, like it becomes much easier because now you actually have something on your resume that you can point to where it's like, oh yeah, she has relevant experience, and people are going to be more receptive to talking to you. Right. And like, I don't know, like if you notice a difference in like even networking too, I'm sure once you had that on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile, whatever, like people were probably more receptive to talking to you as well, right? Because you look like someone who actually has like demonstrated interest in finance as opposed to just like another pre-med student or something.
Mhm. Yeah, no, for sure. I remember, I had some conversations with like bankers and other like financial like professionals before, and a lot of them were saying they often just like ignore, like don't really pay attention to students who reach out if all they see is like STEM experiences, because they
Mm,
really think that that means you haven't put enough thought or like enough care into really looking into finance, looking into like ways you can be exposed. So I'm sure that search fund experience really did a lot for me.
yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Um, in terms of like the interview prep side of things,
Mhm.
um, were you basically starting from scratch then in terms of your technical knowledge? Like, did you know any technicals coming in, or were you essentially like a complete newbie and then you had to pick everything up?
Yeah, I would say I was a complete newbie. I remember when I was talking to a student for Wall Street Mastermind, I think towards the beginning of like the intake process.
Mm.
They asked me a question about the three statements and was like, "Oh, like how do you take me through it?" And I was just like I don't know if that's a good idea because like truly did not know a single thing. But
Mm.
I think, you know, how condensed, how concise things are with the way you explained a lot of the technicals in this program has definitely helped me to really understand a lot of the basics a lot better than I think I would have alone.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's funny, right? Because being a MCB, like being a STEM major, I suspect like what you have to learn on the technical side, like it's not, relatively speaking, like it's not hard versus probably some of the things that you have to learn in school or like the classes you've had to take, right? And so like it's not, it doesn't need to be over complicated, but I think like people make it so complicated and people like, I mean, one, by like going about it the wrong way. Like if you don't study
Mhm.
this stuff the right way, like what a lot of people do is like, for example, you mentioned the 400 questions guide earlier. People will pick up the 400 questions guide and say like, okay, I'm gonna just brute force this and memorize the answers to these 400 questions.
Mhm.
And it's like they're memorizing these answers, but they don't really understand what they're memorizing. And also, like the interviewers, I mean, you went through multiple interviews. Like, how often did the interviewers actually ask you like a question from those guides verbatim? Like, probably almost never, right?
Mhm.
And so, like, if you're just memorizing the exact answers to those questions and you don't know anything else, like, that doesn't really serve you, right?
Mhm.
Or like sometimes people, a lot of people take financial modeling courses and they're like trying to learn how to build these financial models. Like, out of all the interviews that you went through, um, did anyone ask you to build a financial model in those interviews?
No.
Yeah, like that's just not part of the interview process, right? And so like
Mhm.
it's just funny because I don't know, like somewhere along the way, people have been conditioned to believe that, like, oh, if you want to pass technical interviews, then like you need to like learn how to build financial models. And it's like all these financial modeling companies that are telling you that. And what they don't tell you is like, yeah, you need to learn how to build financial models, like to do the job, but you don't need to learn how to build financial models to get the job. Like it's two fundamentally different skill sets. And like a lot of people I feel like are kind of being misled, right? And like you end
Mhm.
up spending so much time. Some of these courses are like 100 plus hours and you spend all this time doing it, and even when you get the interview, like you still can't answer the questions, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so like I think like having the right approach is really really important. um and like I mean in total I think to learn all the technicals, I don't know how much time it took you, but like really like our curriculum on that is like maybe a little over 20 hours, right? Which is like
Mhm.
very manageable. Like even if you want to go through it a couple of times, like we've had students, we've I don't know like how long it took you, but we've had students that learn all their technicals in a span of like 3 to 4 days.
Mm.
Which like if you really want to sit down and like do it in that short
Yeah.
amount of time, like I don't recommend it, but like some people are like, oh, I have an interview coming up, I don't know anything. Okay, I have 4 days, I'm just gonna like cram through everything like I'm cramming for a final exam, and like it's doable, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
only if you do it the right way, right? So um I guess the last thing you mentioned was like, kind of like reaching out to other people in Wall Street Mastermind,
Mhm.
and kind of leveraging the network to help you. Um, I think on that end, like, can you kind of like talk about that a little bit? Like, what are some examples of how other people in Wall Street Mastermind have helped you? Like,
Mhm.
like maybe just like one or two examples off the top of your head.
Yeah. Um, so we have like a very robust Discord, or not Discord, Slack channel.
Mm,
And I think that, even if I'm not directly asking questions, I think just like reading through questions that other people may have, which,
mm,
some of them are really great questions. It really clarifies a lot of things
mm,
for me. And, that's definitely one thing that I've really appreciated. Whether it be like some technical questions, about concepts that like similar to how you would in like a classroom setting, right? Like something doesn't make sense, but you might not know like what questions are best to ask, but then someone else does it. And you're like, okay, like I can just like read the answers and learn
yeah.
from that. So I think that's definitely something that the network here has really helped with. And the second thing is, something I had mentioned earlier, but really scheduling in conversations because I think like you have like every time I've ever reached out to you, Sam, you've really given me at least every time like 4 or 5 alumni who work at specific banks that I'm interested in.
Mm,
And, I think like talking to them about what the interview process is like or what their bank culture is like, what they're really looking for, I think that really helps frame the type of answers I might want to give or how prepared I want to be. I think like all of those things are super, super important, especially for my like, I think quick turnaround.
yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you're just talking about how if you knew you had an interview coming up, you can
Hmm.
reach out and then tell us, hey, I have an interview with this place. And then we will connect you with whatever alumni that have already either worked there or at a minimum have interviewed with that
Hmm.
place. And then they can kind of like, talk to you, whether it's on a call or over Slack about kind of what to expect in the process. And also in some way, like help you prepare some of your answers too, right? Like
Hmm.
a big part of networking is like figuring out like a really thoughtful and unique answer for like why do you want to work for this bank specifically,
Right.
right? And I think like
Right.
that's a question that a lot of people struggle with because they just come up with like these very bland like cookie cutter answers. And if you do that, like honestly that's one of the most important questions. And that the poor question to that or a poor answer to that question alone could probably like just destroy your entire interview, right?
Hmm.
I mean,
Right.
not to exaggerate, like I really think that's the case. And so, so I think like yeah, that's another that's a great example of like how you can leverage like this network of like hundreds of people that have already gone through the process. Um, I think like also like the other example I can think about off the top of my head is like even with like the Rabo interview, like we had
Hmm.
an alum that was working there that was actually like involved on the recruiting team with the recruiting process, and so like he was able to not just help you, but like he helped a lot of the people inside the program who are like interested in applying to Rabo, right? Like,
Hmm.
and so like that just like when you have someone in your professional network that's willing to help you, like it just makes the entire networking process a lot easier, right? If
Hmm.
it's kind of like people say, "Oh, I go to a Target school, I have a lot of alumni." Like it's kind of like that, except in your case, like you said, Yale is a great school. It's a great school, but it's more liberal arts, and you guys probably don't have like as many alumni in banking versus say like a Wharton or something, right?
Yeah.
And so having this other network on the side that's more intercollegiate and has people from hundreds of different schools, I think like that can be a very valuable thing as well, right?
100%. I think like also sometimes bringing it up, like kind of framing the networking like call into, hey, like, can you answer my questions about like why this bank or why whatnot, or like reaching out on LinkedIn, all of that can be pretty daunting or like difficult
Yeah.
for school alumni, especially if some of them are like, VPs or MDs, and it's tough to start that conversation. But I think like because in Wall Street Mastermind, a lot of the alumni are, relatively close in age, it's like a
Mm,
lot easier to like have that conversation and people know what you want, or like they know what to expect already from the get-go.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So I guess, last question for you, which is now that you're like on the other side, I mean, as someone who was able to basically go from being a complete finance newbie to having three offers in just 3 months, which is honestly quite amazing. Um, what's like one piece of advice you have for people who are maybe like still going through the process now, or maybe they're about to gear up for their recruiting process to start, or maybe like at some point in the future when other people are like listening to this interview and they find themselves in a similar situation as you where they're starting a little bit late or they realize they want to do banking a little bit late, like is there any, I don't know, words of wisdom that you want to kind of impart on them where it's like this is something that really helped me tremendously and we can kind of like share that with our audience so that could help them as well?
Mhm. I think personally for me, words that come to mind are just, if you're sure that you want to go into IB, then make that investment in yourself, right? And then follow through with it.
Mm,
Because I think one thing I had really resolved myself to doing when I like decided to join the program was really like getting that offer and then making sure that I was like, very diligent about getting like doing all the preparation work, networking, everything, making sure that I like was taking full advantage of all the resources. I
mm,
think, like if you have decided you're going to do it, then make sure you make the most of your time.
right, right.
Hmm.
And I mean, like, honestly, I think again, going back to the fact, because I'll be honest, right? Like a lot of our students, if they do this program, like their parents have to help them out with it, right? I do think that the fact that you were financially independent, you use your own savings and invested in this, it was like you had more skin in the game. And we see this time and time again where like people that have more skin in the game, this is just human nature. Like, of course you're not gonna let that investment go to waste, right? Like
Mhm.
who in their right mind is gonna like, go all in and then just like not do the work, or like at that point you've like burned the boats, so to speak, and it's like failure is not an option. Like you have to succeed, right?
Mhm.
And like
Mhm.
it's like we actually love that, because when people have that mentality, then like like it's almost guaranteed that they're gonna put in the work that's necessary. And for us, having done this, geez, like so many, there's like hundreds of times that we've worked with almost 700 students at this point. Um, it's
Wow.
like everything you need to do, like we've pretty much done it many, many, many times. Like we know like the exact playbook for it. We can give that to you, no problem. But like you're still the one who has to go out and execute on that, right? And so like
Mhm.
if you have the work ethic and like just even a reasonable level of intelligence, like you don't need to be a genius to get into investment banking, right? But like if you have the work ethic, I think that's the biggest thing, and you're committed to getting the outcome, and you combine that with our playbook, which is pretty much battle tested at this point, like there's almost no reason why you should not be able to get this offer, right? And
Mhm.
so like I think that's kind of like what we've seen through you and through like a lot of other students as well. And so that's really like, for our audience that's still kind of with us and listening, like, if you are serious about getting into investment banking, but maybe you're just a bit behind, or you realize it a little bit late, or you have no finance experience whatsoever, and you're just like starting from scratch, you don't know what to do, you just need some direction, you need guidance, and you want that like support system that's like there for you 24/7 on demand anytime you need, then I want to encourage you guys to just reach out and have a chat with our team. Like we can't work with everybody. This is why like we talk to every single student, and you have to apply to work with us, and like we have to make sure that's the right fit, right? And um what you can do actually is like before you even talk to our team, you can have a call, just like Hedy mentioned earlier. Like you can first have a call with one of the upperclassmen that have already gone through our program, have already finished recruiting, just like any other coffee chat that you have with upperclassmen, right? Just talk to them about the recruiting process. How did they get to where they are? Ask them for any recruiting advice, whatever questions you have on your mind. And then like after that conversation, like depending on how it goes, like if you feel like, hey, yeah, this might be something that could really help me, and you still want to talk to us, then they can help you set up a call with our team, and we can discuss further to see if it's a good fit, right? Or if you after you talk to the upperclassmen, you're like, actually, this is not for me, and I don't really want to do this, then hey, no worries. Like take whatever advice you get from the upperclassmen and just go out and implement on your own, and like no hard feelings, right? Like we can't work with everybody. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, I always encourage you to go and book a call with the upperclassmen at www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to helping you any way that we can. All right. So, with that said, Hedy, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on here and share your story with everyone. I think this is really, really helpful for our audience. And also, obviously, again, huge congrats to you on getting such a great outcome in such a short amount of time, despite starting pretty much from the beginning, right? And I think that's a testament to just your hard work, and also just your willingness to invest in yourself and bet on yourself. And I'm really, really happy that all paid off, and can't wait to see all the success that you have ahead of you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, we're going to wrap it up here for this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. And until next time. All right.